My name is Jenny Curtis, and I reside at Pullman City, where I've worked as a seamstress for the Pullman Company in the repair shop sewing rooms for 5 years. I am a member of the American Railway Union since May 8th and currently the president of the Girls Union Local number 269. My job in the union was to ask for higher wages before workers went on strike. This ultimately failed, and workers were still only making 22 cents an hour, or about $2.25 per day. We were working as hard as we possibly could for a long 10-hour day in squalor conditions, only to receive $2.25 pay. This was unjust and absurd. By the time the Pullman strike erupted, our wages were only 70 to 80 cents per day. As the Pullman Company continued to try and outcompete other businesses, our wages were further lowered to only 40 to 50 cents per day. How were we to continue paying our rent and care for our families? Life was cheaper elsewhere, but we were forced to live in Pullman City, where President George Pullman of the Pullman Company could regulate the price of everyday life. Can you believe he even charged us to use luxuries like the library and church? Life is difficult now because my father just passed away. He was $60 in debt, and now the Pullman Company is charging me to pay for his rent as well as my own. My contract says that I should pay $3 rent every payday, but I cannot afford to do so with such small earnings. What comes next? On May 11, 1894, us workers struck at Pullman because we were without hope. Our peaceful attempts at convincing the Pullman Company for change failed miserably, and it was time to take action. Without the authority of the American Railway Union, we united and initiated a boycott. We refused to run any trains with Pullman cars. Shortly after, Debs, founder of the ARU, offered his leadership and assistance to help us angry workers. The ARU refused to allow any train with a Pullman car to run, except for those carrying mail, a specific measure taken to prevent federal troop involvement. The strike enraged the railroad company, who in turn formed the General Managers Association in order to assert their authority and suppress the revolt. They deemed any switchman who refused to run the cars would be fired, and that the Pullman Company had the right to decide wages. One morning, my fellow workers and I refused to show up for the job, forcing President Cleveland to agree to send federal troops to extinguish the strike. This was the first time ever a federal injunction would be used to squelch a riot, but it ended up causing more harm. Embittered workers smashed switches, stopped trains, lit cars on fire, and acted barbarically. These acts of violence caused the death of many and severed the relationship between workers, industry, and government for a long time. The next morning, a newspaper was printed portraying Debs as a radical and the ARU as violent. I learned of Debs' arrest, and word has it that a few of my friends were also sent to prison for their defiant behavior. With Debs gone, the American Railway Union was dissolved, and workers were forced to resume their jobs, earning the same wage. Fortunately, since I was a seamstress, I was able to keep my job, but I know many others that were blacklisted and would not be hired ever again. Life is just as difficult as it was previously. I cannot afford my home, and working and living conditions are extremely poor. The most headway achieved by this strike was that the people now look at George Pullman as an intolerant and greedy man. But how much does that really benefit workers? It doesn't. Federal involvement increased tension between the people and government, creating a lack of trust and resentment of authority. Evidently, nothing changed for the workers except for our newly founded bitter relationship with industry and government.